When most people think of Disney, they imagine a sense of wonder, magic, and fairy tales that end happily ever after. But if you're like me, you think of a company that's creatively bankrupt and growing far too powerful. What most people don't think of is action-adventure TV shows largely produced in different parts of the world and influenced by Asian culture. That's why they grouped this programming under the banner of Jetix. I vividly remember watching Jetix growing up, and to the extent of my knowledge, it was a semi-popular block that aired on Toon, Disney, and ABC Family. However, after weeks of research and months of putting this project together, I discovered that it was much, much more than that. Allow me to take you back to the 2000s during the prime of Jetix, and let's pretend like this is the first time I've made the video equivalent of a nostalgia trip. So without further ado, let's visit the world of
JR.
Shit, wrong sound effect. The world of Jetix! The story of Jetix is one that begins with some confusing corporate BS. From the late 90s into the early 2000s, shows influenced by and imported from East Asia were among the most popular programming available to kids of the time. It was different, which is why I guess it was the cool thing to watch. When properties like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and Dragon Ball were absolutely defining the zeitgeist, it only made sense that other companies would want their own slice of the pie. It was also during this time that the House of Mouse, aka the Walt Disney Company, was on the tail end of its renaissance and booming from the expansion of their film and TV operations. Not to be confused with their relatively recent acquisition of 21st Century Fox, Disney purchased Fox Family worldwide in October of 2001 for $5.3 billion. This sale included things like the Fox Family channel, which Disney rebranded into ABC Family, control of the international Fox Kids channels, and the incredibly lucrative Saban Entertainment Library, which had 6,500 episodes of kids programming and the rights to franchises like Power Rangers. Also included was majority ownership of Fox Kids Europe, which was independently based in the Netherlands and managed Fox Kids channel feeds across Europe and the Middle East. What remained of the Fox Kids block in America was later taken over by Fox Kids Entertainment as Foxbox and 4Kids TV. With a newly acquired bundle of broadcast rights and a library of shows, Disney created a brand new action block for ABC Family as a place to put that stuff, but it lacked any sort of unique presentation or identity. Internationally, the Fox Kids brand continued to stay intact for a few years, except it had to change because it was no longer affiliated with Fox. So, in January 2004, the ABC Cable Networks Group, Fox Kids Europe, and Fox Kids Latin America teamed up Avengers style to create Jetix. While Toon Disney was often looked at as an answer to Cartoon Network, some considered this move to be an answer to Toonami. According to the initial press release, the unique name Jetix was developed with the goal of finding a word that implied action and adventure and yet could be used in a number of international markets without being a proper name for something else.
Jetix.
Everything checks out. Jetix first launched as a block in the United States on February 14th, Valentine's Day of 2004. At the beginning, you could find it on ABC Family every morning at 7 a.m. Eastern, and on Toon Disney during prime time from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern every night, except Fridays. The original lineup consisted of shows like The Legend of Tarzan, Power Rangers Dino Thunder, Digimon, and Beyblade V-Force. As a way to embrace new media trends and rake in some fresh viewership, the Jetix Cards live game was rolled out simultaneously with the block's launch. Touted as the world's first trading card game that is played concurrently on TV and online, Jetix Cards Live enlisted viewers to register on the Jetix website where they could receive virtual cards themed after characters and elements from the block's programming. A battle card would be revealed during weekend nights, so after watching you'd hop online and select cards from your deck to play. The users with the highest scores each round would have their names show up on Jetix every week. With the popularity of trading card games like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, this seemed like a cool way to introduce new viewers, but it also sounds like something I've seen before. The look of Jetix was anchored in a blue-tinted CGI environment commonly referred to as the world of Jetix. This world was shown at times to have a bunch of different set pieces, but most promos and bumpers took place in a city with wonky skyscrapers and twisted roads. This branding was led by a morphing metallic mascot named Jay, who was commonly known by viewers as the Jetix Cat or the one-eyed pointy metal thing. Maybe it's because both were shape-shifting CGI silver objects, but in my youthful mind, I used to always confuse Jay from Jetix with Flood from Super Mario Sunshine. Not sure if I still get the comparison. Jay would transform into a wide variety of entities, like a rocket ship, a dinosaur, and even a water-pumping device. Although the Jetix visual design was fairly simple, I think it did a good job of accomplishing what it set out to do. It gave viewers a taste of the fast-paced, high-energy programming that the brand would be eventually known for. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the programming you could find on Jetix in the United States. For the sake of time in this already long video, I'll be focusing on its more recognizable shows, and don't worry international viewers, we'll get to you soon. You'll find that plenty of Jetix's shows were imported from Europe, like Oban Star Racers, Wix, and Adam, with a pretty good reason, and no, it's not because they had a preference for shows with an acronym as their title. For the most part, European cartoons from studios like Moonscoop and SIP Animation were a bargain because they could produce episodes for half the cost of American cartoons, and it was way cheaper than sending everything overseas. Across that sea. While Jetix had a well-established relationship with Europe, these shows were crafted with American audiences in mind, to not only get the attention of American audiences, but to also market them internationally like shows that are produced in America. And the cherry on top is merchandising. The bulk of these shows, which were related to action or adventure, lent themselves well to products like comics, clothing, accessories, action figures, video games, DVDs, and so on. Not to mention, some of the series that were developed for Jetix were derived from existing retail commodities. For instance, Wix was based on a comic series of the same name, and Puka was originally a design from an online greetings card in South Korea. This video would be incomplete if I didn't talk more about the uber-successful behemoth of Power Rangers. Power Rangers Dino Thunder premiered on the day Jetix launched, which I remember watching, and somehow its dinosaur-human hybrid villain didn't give me nightmares. Spanning multiple new iterations and rerunning older ones under the name Power Rangers Generations, the mega franchise called Jetix home for half a decade and was clearly a big draw for people to tune into the block. The Digimon brand was also a staple of Jetix, again specific to the United States. In addition to airing the original Digimon series, Jetix was the only place you could catch Digimon Data Squad, which with its toys and video games made it another hot property. I'm sure it was a great show to watch, but personally I never watched Digimon because I always assumed it was a lazy ripoff of Pokemon. Under the name Jetix Animation Concepts, there were some shows produced by Jetix and Disney specifically for the brand. The first of the bunch, Super Robot Monkey Team Hyperforce Go, has strong Japanese influence, Corey Feldman voicing one of the robot monkeys, and a title I have trouble reciting. Then there was Get Ed, a CGI action series about a crime-fighting, genetically modified teen named Ed who was riding a hoverboard 10 years before they became cool. And last, but not least, Yin Yang Yo, which also has strong Asian influence and a difficult name to pronounce. Having shows heavily inspired by Asian culture, as well as shows like Daigunder and Battle Beatamon directly from the region, it was unique to see Jetix breaking boundaries with initiatives like the Made in Japanathon, which offered a glimpse into Japanese life and values for American viewers. It may have been a continuation of a marathon concept from Fox Family, and it may have been a gimmick to promote a new Power Rangers episode featuring their Super Sentai counterparts, but it's the thought that counts. Jetix also had tons of content that once aired on places like Kids WB and UPN, in addition to their catalog from Disney Channel, ABC, and Fox Kids. Watching Jackie Chan Adventures alongside Gargoyles and Kong the Animated Series was always a special viewing experience. As a part of their robust action catalog, the block had a fair amount of superhero programming, largely made up of Marvel cartoons from the 90s. And the range of shows on Jetix from 80s cartoons like Dungeons & Dragons to something like Dragon Booster in what was then the present made it stand out amongst its competitors. With a mix of cheaply licensed, decades-old, and a few new shows, some of which got overambitious with their use of CGI technology, Jetix wasn't always a consistent source of high-quality programming. In other words, sometimes I'd deliberately watch a different channel, but I knew I always had Jetix to fall back on if nothing else was on. Now it's time to put a spotlight on the rest of the globe. It wasn't until I started researching for this video that I discovered how large the worldwide presence of Jetix really was. While it was just a block in the United States, Jetix took the form of an entire channel across many parts of Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and Latin America. Shortly after Jetix launched in 2004 and into 2005, channels fully occupied by Fox Kids were rebranded as Jetix. In regions such as Canada, Australia, and most of Asia where Fox Kids channels didn't exist, Jetix again took the form of a block. At one point in time, Jetix reached 289 million households in over 80 countries and 25 languages, so the United States was just a small fraction of the overall audience. Through Jetix's International Programming Alliance, most of their original programming, stuff like Puka and Get Ed, was also broadcast on their global affiliates, but there were some evident differences in their selection of licensed shows. The UK version of Jetix had Totally Spies and Total Drama Island, which I grew up watching on Cartoon Network. In some regions, Jetix aired Pokemon, largely during the Diamond and Pearl era, and Sonic X. In at least Brazil, they showed The Fairly Odd Parents. And also, Jetix feeds throughout Eastern Europe had Lazy Town. That Lazy Town. Besides promotional materials, there wasn't a lot of original content catered particularly for international audiences, but I was able to find a show called PXG from Jetix in the UK. PXG covered things like gaming news, reviews, and cheats with a charming internet-inspired digital aesthetic.
Konnichiwa, Jetix gamers! I am Kentaro, from the land of the rising sun, and this is PXG!
Because of the fact that Jetix was at one point in time the #1 kids channel in Europe and the Middle East, it made sense for the brand to expand into new domains. And by new domains, I mean rebranding more existing channels. In the early 2000s, Fox Kids Europe had launched alternate channels called Fox Kids Play that were aimed at younger audiences. And as Jetix took over the primary Fox Kids channels, these were naturally rebranded into Jetix Play. In skewing towards a young audience, Jetix Play seemed to mostly broadcast light-hearted classic shows in the realm of fantasy and comedy. Although a good chunk of its programming was made up of things from the Saban Library and Geek Entertainment, it had a few shows in common with regular Jetix. As if all of this extra stuff wasn't already enough, wait till you see the Jetix merch they had in Europe. In the United States, at least, it was virtually impossible to find any merchandise that was specifically Jetix themed. The only piece of Jetix merch I could get my hands on was this promotional sampler DVD that came with the October 2006 issue of Sports Illustrated Kids. It's pretty cool for something that comes with a magazine. There's a full episode of Yin Yang Yo, clips and promos from other shows, and Jetix bumpers in between each segment. But Europe had everything, and it wasn't difficult at all to find products representing this brand across the pond. First off, remember when print media was a thing? There were 10 versions of a monthly Jetix magazine running throughout Europe. While it primarily focused on covering the Jetix brand, it was an overall lifestyle magazine for kids, so it had things like competitions, comics, posters, and interactive DVDs. A series of compilation albums called Jetix Hits were released. Again, speaking as an American living in the 2020s, I have no idea who most of the artists on these CDs are, but there's a few I could recognize, like Kelly Clarkson. There was a game for the PS2 and Nintendo DS called Jetix Puzzle Buzzle. Apparently, it's just a poorly reskinned version of an existing game called Eggmania Eggstream Madness. Having only observed a few minutes of gameplay, I can already tell that I wouldn't have any fun playing it. Also, who the hell is this? Microsoft Paint graphic design is my passion looking ass. There were also plenty of miscellaneous items, like Jetix branded marbles in the Netherlands or Jetix postage stamps in Israel, just scratching the surface of their image in other parts of the world. You could see the Jetix logo in some of the characters on display across Dutch airliners. Jetix even had its own monster truck. I'm not joking, this badass gas guzzler toured around Europe to help promote Yin Yang Yo, and I honestly can't think of a more ridiculous but appropriate way to hype up the brand. Except for in this moment. Things like the monster truck remind me of all the inventive ways Jetix tried to market themselves and interact with their fans. Regions throughout Europe had the Jetix Kids Awards, which seemed pretty similar to the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards with celebrities and musical performances. And, continuing a Fox Kids tradition, both in the States and internationally, Jetix hosted a soccer tournament called the Jetix Kids Cup to promote fair play and cultural exchange. During the global rise of Jetix, the internet was quickly becoming a popular way for fans to engage with their favorite shows beyond the TV, so Jetix hopped on this trend by making their website an interactive hub for viewers. They had schedules, individual pages for each show, and, of course, a selection of fun 3D Groove and Flash games to play. In the present, these games are noticeably dated and clunky, but some of them are still enjoyable and good for what they are. In contrast to this piece of junk, the Jetix Stream 3D racing game is a far better representation of the brand. It's basic, but I love that it takes place within the Jetix environment and manages to incorporate unique elements from its shows. While the Jetix block in the United States didn't have award shows or crazy merchandise, it caught on and performed well in ratings. Just 4 months after it launched, the block on Toon Disney expanded by an additional 4 hours every week after an 83% increase in viewership among boys 6 to 11. And after more ratings boosts among that demographic, Jetix once again expanded to be 7 p.m. to midnight every day of the week. Onward, the growth of its airtime on Toon Disney snowballed even larger, especially in late 2006 when ABC Family dropped Jetix, making it exclusive to Toon Disney. A reason was never explicitly given for why it left ABC Family, but it was clear that the channel was moving in a different direction that geared its programming more to young adult and teen demographics, with shows like Greek and The Secret Life of the American Teenager. This was a move that understandably upset a lot of people because ABC Family was way easier to access than Toon Disney. For reference, Toon Disney was available in about 46 million households, which considerably dwarfs ABC Family's 98 million. At least where I was growing up, Toon Disney was only an option and more expensive in premium cable packages, so while I was fortunate enough to have it, most of my friends didn't. Jetix began to absolutely dominate Toon Disney, sometimes making up roughly 70% of their weekly schedule. Looking back at some old schedules from 2006, Jetix takes up all of the primetime and overnight time slots, while the traditional Toon Disney shows are relegated primarily to the daytime, when kids are at school. It was common for people to have the opinion that Toon Disney had experienced what's referred to as network decay, also known as channel drift. This is where a TV channel moves their programming away from their original niche or concept to widen their audience and bring in more profits. Oftentimes, the shift is usually towards more sensational, lower quality shows. For instance, TLC was originally known as the Learning Channel, and they had educational programs like Great Books, which, you guessed it, is a series about books that are great. However, if you switch onto TLC nowadays, you'll come across rather gimmicky reality shows like Long Island Medium or Dr. Pimple Popper. In the case of Toon Disney, the channel was launched with the mission of celebrating the magic of Disney animation every day, all day. Prior to 2004, Toon Disney was full of classic Disney shorts and their cartoons from the 80s and 90s, especially the numerous series adapted from the Renaissance films, or the stuff from Disney Afternoon like DuckTales and Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. By the time Jetix established itself as a powerful fixture on the channel, many of those classic Disney cartoons began to vanish. Everything on the schedule that wasn't under the Jetix banner generally consisted of reruns for Disney Channel cartoons that weren't as dated. Not to mention, Toon Disney began to air shows in a particular category that makes the blood of many animation fans boil: live action. In addition to showing live action movies, the Power Rangers were obviously on Jetix, and we began to see reruns of The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. Alongside that, Jetix announced in early 2008 that they had live action projects in development, like one called Mongoose and Luther. I wonder what happened to that idea. With Jetix's programming essentially taking over the channel with an incredibly small but active presence of live action shows, it's easy to understand why original Toon Disney fans may have felt abandoned. Some viewers also found problems with Jetix picking up reruns of shows like Superman the Animated Series that were produced by Warner Bros. Animation, who were apparently viewed by Disney purists as their evil arch nemesis. Personally, I don't see what the big deal is, and that's a petty issue at best. Hey, if I can watch great 90s Marvel cartoons with great 90s DC cartoons back to back on the same schedule, you can count me in. Because I was only a kid when Toon Disney was around, and again most of my friends didn't have it, I don't recall talking about the channel or Jetix much compared to the more popular Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. I thought it would be interesting to learn more about what people thought of Jetix while it was still on the air, so I scoured old message boards and forum sites to gather some information. With that said, I kept in mind that the majority of people participating in these forums were likely older than Jetix's target demographic of 6 to 11 years old, but man, were these comments cynical. You'll find a few that are positive towards Jetix and even some that are kind of neutrally constructive, but the vast majority of comments I viewed were negative. I found a post on RetroJunk dated March 2006 that says, "What do you think about Toon Disney's Jetix block? I for one think it sucks. Some of the shows are good, The Tick, Spider-Man, etc., but not the friggin' Power Rangers. They don't belong on Toon Disney. And thanks to Jetix, I can't see my favorite classic Disney and non-Disney cartoons anymore." On the former Toonzone forums in 2007, one user said, "As you all know, Jetix is hell to some people and heaven to others. As for me, it is hell. Do you want to know why? Well, because it has ruined all the classics that I know you all love. Think about it. Darkwing Duck, DuckTales, 101 Dalmatians, Doug, and all the others have not been seen in a long time. I think Jetix should burn in hell. What do you think? Do you really not want to see the classics? Think of the little viewers. They shouldn't have to watch anime all day. They should know how cartoons were really made. I don't care what you think. Jetix really sucks. I know you guys hate it too. Admit it. Yeah, this is the sort of stuff we're dealing with. Also, you can't ask me what I think and then say, I don't care what you think. And then I came across a Jetix rant video on YouTube from 2008, and it honestly might be the most 2008 video I've ever seen. It was edited in Windows Movie Maker, there's no voiceover, lots of insensitive language, and there's a Sum 41 song playing in the background that this person clearly recorded by putting their potato mic next to computer speakers. I had to shorten and censor some of this for obvious reasons, but I tried to recreate the atmosphere using royalty-free music and got my buddy Salty DK Dan to provide the non-existent voice. Take it away, Salty!
Thanks, monsters. You're going to take away Toon Disney to put something else no one wants to say on? God, you're stupid. God, just take away Jetix and put back on 101 Dalmatians and Tarzan. Things like that is what we want to see, not Power Rangers. Me and my brother hate Jetix. Me and my friends are funnier than any new show you put on, but we cuss too much. Disney, you're stupid. Just stop trying to make it better. You just can't... You just make it worse. Jetix sucks! I can't believe Disney. Why do I waste my time with this? Well, BA, comment if you agree. Sorry for all the spelling errors. Worst speller in the 7th grade.
Oh, that makes more sense. Thanks, Salty. Beyond the ones we just went over, I discovered some unusual posts as well, like this one that says, "For some reason, I want to hijack Jetix's US signal with Tony Soprano giving kids seizures among other weird things. Though I wouldn't do it because it's unlawful. I don't want to go to prison." So this is just the beginning of how people were talking about Jetix in the mid to late 2000s. The base of these arguments was fairly trivial to the overall big picture in my opinion. For instance, in a thread called Toon Disney equals sellout, the author doesn't believe Jetix belongs on the channel. As a matter of fact, a lot of people made comparisons to Europe where Jetix was its own channel, and thought Disney should create a brand new Jetix channel in the States. But it's just not realistic to start an entirely new channel. Toon Disney was slumping in the ratings for a long time because it was nothing but classic reruns, and while there's certainly an audience for that programming, it's not sustainable in the long term. It made the most sense for Jetix to air on their existing low-maintenance channel where it boosted ratings exponentially. You can't expect a corporate business like Disney to not make the most money where they can. The entire reason why this wave of action shows were branded as Jetix and not under the Disney moniker was to differentiate them. And Jetix certainly had a good share of what at the time were considered classics, but perhaps they weren't the ones those angry viewers were looking for. While I'm not in favor of these criticisms, I can at least empathize a little bit and get where they're coming from. This was in the 2000s, when internet video was still in its relative infancy, and the only popular ways to watch stuff were either catching it on TV or buying it on a DVD or VHS, which many shows didn't have. This transition away from classics kind of happened to Cartoon Network. It started as an old Hanna-Barbera, Warner Bros. And MGM rerun channel, then they started making their own content and the reruns began disappearing, then they moved all of the old stuff over to Boomerang, and now Boomerang is Trust me, I used to be one of those rant posting "where did my classics go" people, albeit with far less offensive language, but I've learned a lot as time has gone on about the business and the nature of this industry, and that's given me a new perspective. Trends come and go, new content is constantly being created, and it's not healthy for things to stay the same forever. As this post on Retro Junk from late 2007 puts it, things change, for better or for worse. I used to be upset about channels changing, and while there is some sadness within me still, I know that things must and will change. And with that said, Disney unveiled a rebrand in August of 2008 after being under wraps for more than a year that would ultimately put an end to the conflicting sides of Toon Disney and Jetix. Toon Disney would be fully rebranded into a new channel called Disney XD, or as one Twitter user called it, Disney but for people who could skateboard. Although some people assume that it was derived from Disney's Extreme Digital Service, nobody really knows why they named it Disney XD, but I've always suspected that it's supposed to represent the XD laughing face you'd text your friends. You know, Disney XD? But really, that's what this new and reinvented channel was all about. It had a tech-savvy edge with lots of video games, extreme sports, rock music, and whatever else was trendy at the time. Check out the Disney XD launch promo and you'll get a taste of everything I just listed. This was largely because of their heavy targeting to boys, who, between the ages of 9 and 14, reportedly spent $50 billion every year of their parents' money. They were missing a chunk of that demographic and struggled to fight the perception that they were only for girls. Disney wanted this channel to be the true headquarters for boys, similar to how Disney Channel was that for girls. People had their speculations for why the rebrand was happening, especially since this was in the middle of the Great Recession, but Disney just wanted to expand their reach and unify their branding. It's also likely that a change was necessary when Toon Disney was only getting 10 to 15% of the viewers that Disney Channel had. At the end, Jetix content was airing on Toon Disney 90 hours a week. Considering that Jetix started out airing just 12 hours a week on Toon Disney in 2004, it's fair to say Jetix left a huge impact on the channel. Alongside the announcement, Disney mentioned that any decisions regarding the rebrand of international Toon Disney and Jetix channels would be made on a case-by-case basis at a later date. This was followed up with Disney announcing in December of 2008 that they plan to obtain 100% ownership of Jetix Europe by purchasing the outstanding shares they didn't already own. This move seemed to confirm suspicions that the end of Jetix was near, and that Disney wanted this XD branding to reach a global audience. Disney XD launched in the United States on February 13th, 2009, which also happened to be Friday the 13th. This marked the end of Toon Disney after 11 years, and it was just one day shy of Jetix's 5-year anniversary. You could immediately see the push to reach that tween male demographic reflected in their programming with shows like Zeke and Luther, Kick Buttowski, Suburban Daredevil, and Aaron Stone, who, let's be honest, was an OG epic gamer.
Hey, you might be able to beat someone who's not very good. Sorry, bro. But now you're facing Aaron Stone.
Check this guy out. You think he's friendly?
What's funny about this situation is that 6 months after Disney XD launched, they actually reported bringing in higher primetime ratings among girls rather than boys. This was a refreshing change of pace from Toon Disney, which wasn't exactly the go-to place for brand new original shows, and more of a dumping ground and cemetery for Disney TV animation. Disney XD was still that, but clearly more focused on having their own identity. Throughout the rest of 2009 and into late 2010, the 19 international Jetix channels were rebranded one by one into either Disney XD or regular Disney Channel. Following that, most of the Jetix Play channels eventually transitioned into Disney Junior. And yes, even the Jetix Monster Truck was rebranded. With the fresh rebranding of European and Middle Eastern Jetix Play feeds complete by the middle of 2011, the Jetix brand officially went extinct. Toon Disney purists, as if they weren't already angry enough, referred to Disney XD as Jetix 2.0 because of its increased efforts to include action shows and target males. But I don't think this was the case at all. Sure, the culmination of Jetix's increased presence on Toon Disney throughout the years showed them that action shows were profitable, but Toon Disney was still there, even if it was in the back seat. The first thing to ever air on Disney XD was Phineas and Ferb, particularly the music-centric episode Dude, We're Getting the Band Back Together, and that doesn't sound very Jetix to me, at least with what they showed in the US. Despite some rumors a few years back, the channel is still alive and kicking Buttowski today. Disney XDs across the world have shut down, this including a recent announcement that the UK affiliate is closing in favor of Disney+, but things seem fine in the US. With Saturday morning cartoons gone and Cartoon Network shifting their focus away from the action genre, I appreciate that Disney XD is one of the last places on TV to watch action cartoons, even if they're not so great. In the time following Disney XD's launch, the Walt Disney Company acquired Marvel and Lucasfilm, as I'm sure we all know, and it's allowed Disney to become an even larger juggernaut of an entertainment brand. When I look at Disney XD today, having been around for a little over 10 years, they've definitely evolved since the start and broadcast actual Let's Plays now. But in 2020, I still feel traces of that combined Toon Disney and Jetix era, even though there's different shows. They've got action anime stuff like Yokai Watch and reruns of now older Disney Channel cartoons like Gravity Falls and Star vs. the Forces of Evil. And in addition to airing the current Disney Channel cartoons, they've got some original shows of their own. There's, of course, the DuckTales reboot, and I guess Big Hero 6 the series. Heck, if there's anything I remember about Toon Disney, it's that they aired a lot of cartoons based on their movies. As for the state of Jetix in the present day, Disney hasn't touched the brand since they stopped using it about 10 years ago. The last evidence I could find of anything relating to Jetix was an annual shareholders meeting for Jetix Europe that occurred in March of 2012. If you try visiting the Jetix Europe website now, it'll redirect you to the Disney International site. With the exception of some older Disney shows like Gargoyles and classic Marvel cartoons, you won't be able to find most of Jetix's programming on Disney+. The first 2 seasons of Super Robot Monkey Team whatever just got added, so let's hope that more Jetix shows are on the way. Occasionally you'll see posts on social media of people reminiscing about Jetix, but it seems largely overshadowed by its contemporaries, 4Kids TV and Kids WB. Someone in the Tiny Jetix subreddit wanted to start singing the World of Jetix theme song and nobody followed it up. Let's get that chain moving. One thing for sure, however, is that its international fan base is still around. It makes sense that certain regions around the world would be more attached to it than its fans in the US because it was their entire channel. It's been fun watching old Jetix branded content from foreign markets, and there's also a couple of legally questionable fan-made Jetix livestreams on YouTube in Russian. You'll find a lot of fan-made Jetix stuff all over the place, whether that's promos, art, or even revivals. There's been quite a few unsolicited fan attempts to bring back Jetix, and again, while that's legally questionable, it's nice knowing that people grew such a connection with that branding that they wanted to make their own version of it. It's interesting to come across a ton of recent Bring Back Jetix campaigns when plenty of petitions to get rid of Jetix were circulating around when it still existed. I, for one, also miss Jetix. I'm nostalgic for highly branded content and long for that block experience of watching a channel within a channel. Online video is overthrowing cable and network TV as a dominant form of media consumption, and with that, the need for creative broadcast bumpers and promos has shrunk. Admittedly, I don't watch a lot of live TV myself anymore because it's just not accessible and convenient for me, but it'd be cool if streaming services tried to make the way they present their content more quirky and distinctly memorable. And no, not like Quibi. In the 5 years it existed, Jetix allowed its viewers to escape to a stylistic realm that felt so different from ordinary life. It felt like the world of Jetix really belonged to you. While the quality of shows that aired on Jetix could be less than average at times, the selection was diverse and most of them were unconventional in comparison to my regular preferences. It's difficult to imagine any future circumstances where a return of Jetix would make any sense, but I know I'll always look back fondly at times where I could tune into Jetix and experience a fresh domain of cool action and fun times. Hey guys, thanks for watching and making it to the end. Let me know in the comments if you have any memories or opinions of Jetix, especially if you're a viewer from outside of the US. Also, big thanks to Salty DK Dan, Nick and Moore, and Soft Spoken for helping me out with this video. You can find their stuff in the description. Anyway, I'm Monsters Review, and have a spectacular day.